Hello dear learners, first of all I welcome you to this unit on media, audience, gender and activism. In module 9 of the MOOC course, Media, Audience and Gender, we will learn about the intricacies of audience in different types of media along with the significance of gender as a primary factor. This unit, Media, Audience, Gender and Activism, will help you understand ways in which media represents gender along with the different elements of media as well as the audiences, the content and how the different factors determine activism. So first, the objective of the modules are to determine the role of media and its perspective on women, identify the impact of content of media on women-related issues, process the element of activism and the role of viewers in framing the narrative. So dear learners, media as we know is a very powerful tool. We know that media has got a significant influence in the way we perceive things. Reality is reflected by media. The content that we see today is all how media projects itself. And now that we're talking about gender in media, it plays a very crucial role. Gender, as we know, is a very important subject today. As we know that media today is a social construct and it's both the product as well as the creator of social norms in the society. Media texts never simply mirror, or reflect reality, but they are actually real sometimes. But instead they construct the way in which society is supposed to function. Eventually they create an idea of social norm that is considered to be reality or imitation of reality. Sometimes there are hegemonic definitions of what's to be termed as reality. These definitions are largely acceptable. Now when we're talking about gender is today a very talked about issue as well as in media, because the subjects, the content that media presents itself has a lot of gender-based norms or gender-based topics. Now, if you talk about feminists, they push forward the idea that there have been patriarchal orders which have created a hegemony in media. The outcome of such content are likely, are made to look like non-ideological, objective, neutral, and certainly non-gendered. However, media has always been at the center of criticism from the feministic perspective, since it tends to reflect the dominant value system, whether women have been shown to be dominant or fitted into stereotypical roles. We know that media is the fourth pillar of democracy, so it is actually very crucial how media projects women, because it is ultimately developing a kind of reality, like I've already said, and it's also creating a kind of norm which becomes accept form of social structure. So it is very crucial that media needs to maintain a balance in reporting not just news stories but projecting programs and any kind of advertisement, so as to not to resort to misinformation, disinformation or hyperinformation. While commenting on gender as an audience, there are certain factors that needs to be taken on. First of all, if you're talking about gender in media, let's first talk about what is very crucial. First thing is about ownership. Who are these content creators or who are these ownership? See, ownership of media by different gender, apart from men in the globe, has been quite limited. The ownership is primarily dominated by males, which tend to make the design more patriarchal or the content which is more inclined toward them as dominating. In the broad perspective, this ownership is often critiqued because it kind of leads to a dominant system of language and narrative in the social structure where men are made to look like the one who are leading the social order. Secondly, content and representation. Whenever we see an advertisement or whenever we see any content, maybe in news or something, we often see that women or maybe a transgender, they're often supposed to be victims, or maybe they are also shown in stereotypical role, in subjugated role. So it has got to do a lot with representation, because it also means what culture they come from. We have to understand whether culture has an impact of how they are being shown, whether the cultural values, beliefs, practices, traditions, norms are being communicated properly. The exposure to different forms of media have been perceived and also regulated. It is to a considerable extent. What kind of media are these gender or women being exposed to? That is something we need to understand, because they also perceive themselves in the same reality that they see. Third is the communication medium. The communication medium plays a significant role, mostly due to the involvement of language and communication style. Language, dialect, the way or mode in which different genders are addressed. Those are very important factors that needs to be taken account while representation of gender. Cultural symbols. We do understand that there are a lot of symbols in religion or culture which are taken as the basic nomenclature, which are taken as the main important factor of culture, and whether these cultural symbols are gender neutral or whether they have a patriarchal sense to it. This can be translated differently by different audiences based on their cultural exposure. So this is actually why gender and media is important for us to study, because we understand under what context that particular content is being shown, and under what context the audience understand the content that has been shown to them. So this is something where a culture, the social structure, the cultural symbols play a very crucial role. Next is regulating the content. Now, there are many cultures where a number of things are being regulated or maybe censored, or maybe there are many religions where there exists a lot of hegemony or dogmatism or cultural parochialism. So in that case, also we have to understand whether media is clear in reflecting these things, or media also falls into the same framework of narrating the same dogmatism. Narrative themes, the next point, which is the art of storytelling depends a lot on culture, the social and historical background. If we see sculptures, if we see heritage structures, we see that there's been some sort of storytelling. If we go by the sculptures which are in different kinds of civilizations, and if we see the carvings in the temples, we understand that these culture, they narrate women as differently. And we kind of understand that women and audiences are sometimes fed into such beliefs, and sometimes they're portrayed in a certain manner which adheres to a historical narrative. So this kind of historical narrative also plays a very crucial role how gender is being projected in media, especially in terms of narration. Now that we already know how the content and gender is related, now we'll talk about media activism. So what is activism? According to Oxford Dictionary, the term mobilization is used to signify the task of bringing together the things needed for a particular purpose. Activism, on the other hand, has been referred to as an activity of working to achieve social or political changes, especially as a member of an organization with a particular aim. So when we see an activism, it is not something where people are just mobilizing people together, whether there is some end product which is actually coming out. Media has played a crucial role in communicating ideas and beliefs to a large set of people, and here it has also been a part of activism. Media communication has been used to advance the ideas and generate unified acceptance of facts and belief. For example, we have seen the Me Too movement where media has played a crucial role as an activist, where it has got the attention of the whole world in portraying issues where women have been subject to some sort of violence or sexual abuse. So we can also talk about the different ways in which maybe a particular marginalized section is being exploited by another section. So their activism comes into fore because media brings out these stories in front of people and advances the ideas and generates an acceptance. Over the course of history, be it in the West or the Asian subcontinent, print media, social media, we've always seen that activism, mobilization through activism or activism through mobilization has been persistent. Be it the fall of the Berlin Wall in Germany or the similar outcry in America where people wanted the Vietnam War to end, or in India where we saw that the people resorted to print media to bring about a sentiment against the British rule. With the intrusion of television, of course, the media has been more impactful in garnering the emotions of the people. The television in India played a very crucial role. For example, in the Jessica Lal murder case, the Nitish Katara murder case, a number of other stories where media had actually started playing a very crucial role. With the dynamics of media changing every day, now participatory media has become more crucial, and this creates room for expression of ideas. Social media facilitates the process here. We have seen that now from print, when we're talking about the history of India, we've come to television where we're talking about activism, where people are going for a particular issue. People are being mobilized together by television news channels or any other form, like maybe even films where they're talking about climate change. We're coming to social media where there's a lot of participation going on. People are participating, people are being part of different organizations, different, self groups, help groups. They are becoming part of different bodies which are protecting different, different sections of the society, or maybe even animals, everything. So they are in social media, everybody is mobilized towards a particular issue. So there needs to be but of course, activism does not mean that just because there is some outcry of a particular issue, it qualifies to be activism. For activism, there are certain basic things which needs to be kept in mind. First, usually it is about common interests. People need to have common interests so that they come together. There could be a number of issues, both long-term as well as short-term. Next, activism does not happen only because people are aware of a particular issue, but they need to organize formal and informal network. They need to come out, maybe they need to have, web pages where they are talking about a particular issues, or they are going out, they're forming groups. It leads to some sort of action. Next, developing a sustainable and long-lasting momentum. There have been a lot of activism issues which have been going on across the world, but most of these issues die down only because nobody is being able to sustain them. For passionate people who mobilize such groups, social media can actually foster an environment driven by common interests. But of course, this does not last very long, so there needs to be a kind of sustainability which can be used as a kind of study how people are fighting or how people are continuously using a particular form of media to advance a particular cause. Okay, so activism can also mean advocacy, where, for example, they can advocate advocate for a particular cause. They can talk about, maybe protecting the glaciers, or maybe they can talk about ending fossil fuels. So all those kind of issues need to be addressed. So now we know that media activism has its own benefit, but of course, media activism also has a number of disadvantages. Some of them are superficial. For example, most people who click or like a particular issue, share a particular issue, they feel that their work comes to an end just with that, and they do not actually participate. So that leads to superficiality, and it also sometimes the hashtag activism has become like a trend, and people end up following a particular hashtag for a particular period of time without understanding the issue from all angles. So that is why it tends to become superficial, especially in terms of gender. Next is scattered network. Yes, it is digital activism tend to have a large group of people who come from different areas. So in terms of gender motivated activism on gender mobilization, if people are scattered, many people in different cultures or different part of the world have different issues. So it is very difficult to bring to a unanimous point sometimes. Thirdly, digital dependency. Activism depends entirely on digital existence. If something does not have a digital existence, it will not have its life. So if you are being digitally active only then in a country where there's a lot of digital divide, there are a lot of people who are supposed to be left out. So this does not call for equal distribution of digital power. And relatively, there's lesser life. For example, I said since it's superficial and sometimes since it depends a lot on digital existence, sometimes it becomes very small and people forget the issue. Lastly, it needs to slacktivism. In case of gender issues also, we have seen like Black Lives Matter, sometimes a lot of people who participated in these kind of gender related mobilization or activism, they feel that just simply liking or sharing a particular issue can make them feel part of that particular issue as a whole, but it's not like that. It's a lot of slack and laziness of the people, and this is called slacktivism. Now we know what is media activism, we know about the benefits, we know about the demerits. Now let's move on to viewer activism. What is audience and activism? See, for example, viewers are not exactly always passive. There are a lot of theories which say that viewers simply accept a lot of things. People like the magic bullet theory, where people say that, where theorists have always said that people accept whatever is given to them like a bullet, but does not happen like that. There's been a lot of limited effects. For example, Paul Lazar's limited effects theory says that it's not like that. The audience have a sort of engagement, a sort of interpretation of what is going on. So viewer activism actually determines how the viewer looks at a particular thing and how they perceive. If it's the gender, do gender get motivated? We have to understand, does gender get motivated when they are seeing something which is happening on social media to talk about themselves? Is there any sort of movement that happens to them? Does it mobilize them? And of course that does. So that is not exactly passive. In case of viewer, today the viewer is definitely not passive because of the role of social media. Everybody's got a smartphone. Most people have access to digital media. So when the role of social media, we understand that people are becoming more, active, and they are expressing their opinions, sharing information and content with like-minded people. There's a lot of awareness because of viewer activism. People understand that there's something which has been existing in a remote corner of, maybe Asia or maybe in the West, and people understand that sometimes the problems are very similar. So this is why, some sort of mobilization has been possible only because of viewer activism. The viewer activism, like I said, for example, the Me Too movement, the Jan Andolan, all these viewer activism, people were motivated by what content they saw on television or on their social media. Viewer activism has power, but it also has challenges. Whether there's been, some sort of connection, whether there is some sort of, there's a lot of misinformation going on in the world today. So whether viewer activism can also be subject to that kind of misinformation. So that is the limitation. It is, however, to summarize this, viewer activism is very dynamic and evolving concept, which highlights the role of audience in shaping the world. Okay, so now a good example of viewer activism can also be seen during disaster or any kind of problems that has happened over the world. People have come together and mobilized themselves to fight the challenge, to give rescue, rehabilitation, all kind of issues were, actually addressed by viewer activism. Now, coming down to connecting with audience. Now, campaigners need to find, or, maybe mobilization activism needs to find a way to engage. It cannot happen that one day you're talking about an issue and next day you're forgetting. So how does this engagement happen? It happens while maintaining the values. There needs to be a massive follow-up in gender-related issues, because gender, as we know, is often subdued. Like we've already said, gender has a lot of problem regarding ownership. A lot of media organizations are owned by, generally male or maybe the dominant class in the society, and which does not address the issues of the gender or the marginalized group. So in that case, follow-ups need to be there to understand whether this will survive the practical problems that they are going to address. Digressing from the problem is another issue, and that is not exactly what needs to be taken up, because sometimes a number of issues get digressed into political issues and it becomes completely dissolved. The purpose gets dissolved. So is everyone picking up the right medium for gender? Is the medium accessible? Maybe if radio is accessible, is it accessible? Is it affordable? Does everybody have access to smartphones or digital media so that they can talk about or they can be aware of a certain thing? And targeting people really matters, whether they are people who are experts in a particular issue, whether experts in gender, feministic ideas, whether those people are being addressed. That is something which is very crucial. Next is making it cost effective is very important. We cannot be talking about big changes and we cannot be talking about only expensive smartphones. We also have to talk about whether it is reaching out to them in the most remotest corners where maybe digital dependency is quite less. Lastly, we have to realize that all the activists, all the viewers, all the people, all the audiences, all the gender level, at all level will not have the same level of commitment, hence incentivizing sometimes the involvement needs to be in practice. Overall, there have been a few campaigns which have had a great success story, but most importantly, in terms of gender, it is something which needs to be spoken about in the long run, because it needs to break away from the long-standing, basis of patriarchy that we live in. Then, lastly, like we talk about gender and activism, I would like to talk about how gender has been overlooked in the history. For example, in the 1970s, there was no awareness how gender actually can have a social movement too. Then how feminist activism has evolved over the years, sociologically as well as politically. Towards the 1990s, there was a new movement. People were talking about everything, and there were a lot of movements regarding women and their body rights, women and the portrayal in advertisement, stereotyping transgender, their role in the society, the driving rights of women in the Middle East, to marital rights, right to aborting, among many other issues have come up recently, and all these issues are being subject to both viewer activism as well as audience reception. Eventually, we can understand that viewer activism, gender and audience all are part of a powerful structure which plays a crucial role in sustaining the movement and delivering the rights and the responsibilities to the different gender, the marginalized section. So, in the end of this unit, we have understood the importance of gender's participation in media, the importance of ownership. We've understood the kind of balance that is required in reporting news stories or in films, portrayal. We've also understood about the merits of activism as well as the demerits of activism. Lastly, we've understood what is viewer activism and how it can play a crucial role in determining the rights of gender. And with this, we understand that there needs to be a massive follow-up, which are crucial for campaigns to survive, followed by practical solution. And with this, we come to the end of the entire session. Till then, bye.